Welcome, everybody. This is PnP Weekly, episode 175. It is 22nd of August. Christmas is coming. Get ready for that in the Northern Hemisphere, of course. Summer is coming in the Southern Hemisphere, which is so mind-blowing still.
Well, Christmas is coming across the world. The winter is coming in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah. Summer is coming in the Southern Hemisphere, right?
But the Christmas is universal. It's the same time. It's the same time for everybody.
It is. Yeah, that's true.
Anyways,
don't generalize. You never know. Anyway, so in the PnP Weekly, we talk about the latest on Microsoft 365.
About pointless things.
Yeah, exactly. Latest on Microsoft 365. We do have a visitor almost always on the show, with few exceptions in the past, but and then we covered the latest news from Microsoft and from community. This week we have Gavin Barron, right? Barron?
Yes.
Barron? Cool. From the Microsoft Craft team. He used to be a partner, working on the partner side, so as an ISV or a system integrator, but joined Microsoft Craft team quite recently, a few weeks ago. So we'll talk about with him on his journey to be an MVP and then move into the Craft team and what now. He's been pretty open on social media on the fact that it's drinking from the fire hose and trying to figure out how the system actually works. So how long did it take you, Waldek, on getting kind of a relaxed?
So that was an interesting thing, right? When I joined, before I joined, I was in the Microsoft 365 space for 12, 13 years-ish, right? And I thought, you know what? And I joined Microsoft in the same space, right? So I used to work in 365 space or SharePoint, Office 365, Microsoft 365 with all the things like, identity, Azure and all that. So tech-wise, I knew my things. And I joined job in the same space, like being an advocate for Microsoft 365, building 365 apps. It's like, okay, I know this. And then when I joined, I recall my manager said, you know what? It's going to take you like 9 months to really find your way. 9 months? No. Like to really understand how things work and all that. I was like, 9 months?
Yeah.
I was like, how? Like, I've got all this experience. Like,
true.
No.
True.
And then it turned out he was right, but I was right too, right? So yes, on the tech space, I was like, I got it. Like there was nothing, like I was pretty up to date on the things like, like Teams, Microsoft Graph, APIs, Azure servers, like all the tech things.
Yep.
On the other hand, processes, people, how we look at impact at Microsoft, how we do work, how we organize ourselves, all the different teams. While I knew that there are internal teams doing different things, like how people work, how people organize, how people like all the things like reorg, like how we try to address changes in the market through reorgs, like how all of that works. That was like, he was right. It definitely took me a few months to really like find my place in it. Like, how do I fit in the org? Finding my pace, how you communicate about things, the, let's say, non-technical part of the job, that definitely took me a few months, despite like me be like, how? No way. I know my things. I'm not coming from college. I have work experience. I have field experience. It's like, yeah, that's cute. And this is different.
Yes. Exactly. And then you understand the connections between the organizations and teams and finally start realizing that, those people are interested only about these things. Those people are interested in these things. Now it makes sense why they externally...
Well, people focus on their work, which is good.
Yes,
because
exactly.
Because Microsoft is a big place, so you cannot do it all. But then we also need to appreciate the fact that our developers, customers, they approach things differently. Like how we are organized internally is less relevant to them when they build apps on 365, right? So this is also an interesting dynamic and connection that in my job, and I guess you have exactly the same thing, right? What that you can bring to your team because you're exposed to that, and they might be exposed to that a bit less.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, we'll probably have a similar discussion with Gavin because that interview is happening later today as we're recording this a bit earlier. But let's jump on that interview and then come back on the weekly articles. Welcome. That started really well. So welcome, Gavin, to the PnP Weekly. It is episode 175. I don't know why we haven't actually invited you here in the past as well. We do apologize, but it's good to have you on the show. We now do have a good excuse to have you on the show because something has happened in your career side. But you were an MVP as well. Can you do a quick intro of what you've done in the past and what do you do now?
Yeah, so for my past sins, I was an MVP in SharePoint and Office development and a couple of other categories as things changed over the years. I got thrown into SharePoint as part of an upgrade to WS 3.0 or MOS in January of 2007 when I started a brand new role. And they needed to find something for me to do before they put me on a customer site. And I kind of fell into SharePoint through that and wound up becoming an MVP, very much a developer-focused MVP. It's always what I've been doing is software development and web development. The last few years, though, I haven't been so much in the SharePoint and Office space. I've actually been building the websites for all the large Microsoft events like Build and Ignite and Inspire with a very large team, lots of other vendors, but that's been quite fun. But yeah, a month ago now, I started with Microsoft as a principal engineer.
Yay!
On the Microsoft Graph team, focusing on developer experience. Specifically, I'm looking at our JavaScript-based properties. So that's our SDKs and a little thing called the Microsoft Graph Toolkit.
So you will be actually then working with Seb. Is that then the connection? Whenever Seb is back from his well-deserved parental leave. So
yeah, I am. He's back in just over a month.
Yeah. So you're then fully adapted and understand how Microsoft works by that time, right?
Hey, Seb, I've got three ideas here.
No. I am very much learning how different it is inside the mothership than from the outside.
Yeah. Now, let's focus on that one bit. I have to explain. So you worked actually super closely with Microsoft for quite a few years. So if anybody has signed in and registered to Ignite or Build and so on, they've been actually using stuff which you build together with the team, which you've been part of. And you've been really close with the company, but still moving into the company is like, oh, this is how it works. So was that the experience?
That's
or how was
why.
it?
Yeah, there was a lot of moments of, okay. Oh, so that's what people were talking about in conversations that I've had, and just it's quite a shift to make mentally. It's challenging, but it's exciting to be doing new things and learning new things, really.
Yeah. Any kind of a things which you can be like, oh, I always thought, now it makes a bit more
NDA.
sense. Beep, 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 beep. And
More
then we went beep, beep, and we did beep, 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 beep.
I will say that for the graph.
Or any other first impressions, like, wow, this is really cool. Or,
I mean, the amount of output we're generating with the small team that we have for the Graph Developer Experience core team, like, it's quite impressive. The number of different fronts that we're delivering software on with the size of team we have. Working with a team so we've got folks all around the world, literally all around the world. But with the development team, we have a core development center in Nairobi, Kenya, as well as here in Redmond. So learning how to work with those folks it's a learning process, and it's actually a really fun one.
Yeah. And you're working. Are you working from home mainly, or are you working from the office? Or what's
he's in New Zealand. You can see it, right?
Yeah, from the background. Yes.
Yeah.
This is actually a background from New Zealand.
There you go.
I'm in a hybrid situation. I'm in the office a couple of days a week, and I'm home.
Yeah. Because you are located in Redmond area. Let's come back on the craft toolkit and all of that future in a second. We're going to deep dive and get all things out of you and talk about your colleagues like Vincent Bire and all of that stuff. But let's talk a bit about the New Zealand. So you used to actually be in New Zealand. You got your first MVP probably in New Zealand, if I remember correctly. And yes. Then you worked with Microsoft already for a while and then decided to move the Redmond. Why? Why did you? Well, let's start first with why and then go to how and then the contrast and differences.
Yeah. So for anyone who hasn't worked with Microsoft, there is a large group of people in Redmond who you have to work with if you're working as a vendor or even as a remote person.
Really? No, just kidding. Just kidding.
So, and sometimes as a vendor, the only time that those people can meet with you is, say, 9 a.m. Pacific.
Yep.
And in New Zealand at this time of year, that's 4 a.m. And when the customer says that's the only time slot they've got for the next week and a half, you take it. So you get up at 4 a.m. for a phone call and then get back to sleep. So that was a little bit, and just the ability to be a little bit closer to my customers was a motivator. But for me, my wife and I had spent 2 years living in Canada and being ski bums. And we wanted to move back to North America to explore more of what's on offer up here. And frankly, to have a longer ski season was a little bit of a draw as well.
Well, that's actually a really good point. That it's never, especially if you have a family, it's not your unique decision, never, or it never should be, at least, unless you're ready to face the consequences of that decision.
On PnP Weekly, we talk about technology and family advice.
Of course, no. But it's if we think about technology is all about humans and people, and this is all about people reaction and people
very deep Vesa, like on Monday, like I'm surprised. Like this is I don't know, the third time we talked today, and it's like you're like every single time you're like,
some new sights for me. So that's good.
Philosophical Vesa.
To be able to be, let's say, to be able to work in a company like you did, and to be able to work with Microsoft efficiently, you have to have your life and work in balance, right? So therefore the family and the wife situation, everything else has to be in balance. Of course, whatever that means for a unique person is highly subjective. So everybody has their own way of doing things. But it's kind of a good thing to call out that those decisions to move is never just a decisions by one person, typically if there's a family existing.
Absolutely. We actually, when the company said, hey, like we'd like to move you up to North America, the timing was such that we actually said, hey, let's just put the brakes on a little bit here. We'll pause that for about a year, please, because turns out that at that time my wife was pregnant with our first child, and she was very much opposed to the idea of moving to North America to have our first child with no family around, which totally fair.
Makes sense.
Worked out for us.
Yep.
Yeah. And I guess it is a really awesome thing, right? That it goes two ways, right? So on one hand, the company wanted you to go there, but on the other hand, they totally understood, like, not now, but maybe let's revisit in a year, and that's perfectly fine too, right? So you didn't have that push that you had to do it. It's either now or never, right? So it's really awesome to hear that your company that gave you that ability, that room, but also was perfectly fine. Okay, not now, but we will revisit. And there's, no harm done. No,
they were a great company to work for. They don't officially exist anymore, having been acquired by by Capgemini. And
there you go. So you left, and then the whole company was dissolved.
So.
But
But on that moving, is now the situation then that do you have a long-term plan, or are you gonna see how long you're gonna stay in the Seattle? Because again, I can imagine the New Zealand is, from a cultural perspective, it's quite different. They keep on saying actually that Finland and New Zealand are pretty
the weather,
close.
the people. Like, is there something that isn't different? Well, you both speak English, kind of.
So let's start with what was are there any big cultural differences, like really big things which you needed to learn in the US culture?
There's been a few. People are not as willing to talk about politics here. It can be a bit of a taboo subject sometimes. Let's just put it that way. And it's actually a really good way to avoid conflict by not talking about politics. But one of the strange cultural shifts is having to work out anything medical. It's like, okay, is this covered by my insurance? Who's the provider I need to go through? Whereas New Zealand's, horrible communist country with socialized healthcare and public health.
Yep.
Totally
Go to the doctor and get referred to the place you need to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was in quotes, right?
Yeah.
for the podcast listeners, just to make sure.
If you're listening on audio, that was sarcasm. I love my country.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I know that's one of the things. Any other things? Of course, what I've understood, just to call out for anybody who's been looking into moving, also the public transportation is a bit different. Even though Seattle area is getting better, actually.
How would you know about public transportation in New Zealand?
I'm well aware of things in the world.
Some say.
Actually, I was living in Auckland, New Zealand before we moved to Seattle. The public transit systems are both equally horrible.
Okay, fine. Fine.
They are sufficient, but nothing more.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair.
This city at least is in parts highly car dependent. There's places that you live, if you live here and you don't have a car, you're going to have a horrible time. So that's been quite a shift. Where my wife and I first lived, we actually deliberately chose to live in places with good access to public transit to get me to and from work.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Do you actually have a proper American car?
No.
Because you've been there for a few years, right? So you would expect.
I don't have a proper American car.
Okay, so
we
no
have
trucks.
Subaru Outback, which is
Japanese, or is it Korean?
It is Japanese.
Yeah.
Assembled in America. This one, but it's good for our lifestyle. It gets us to the mountains. I've driven it through quite a large amount of fresh snow to and from mountains. It's for us as a single car for our family. The kids are getting older, so we're actually we put a deposit on a brand new EV. Hope to take delivery of in 2 or 3 months.
Yep, cool.
Interesting. I'm curious.
Kia EV6.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough. So nothing exorbitant, like no, I don't know, Tesla truck or.
No Cybertruck, no Rivian, although those things are quite cool looking.
Yeah, they are. Now, you've now stayed in Seattle for a while, and now you get to the new role in Microsoft. And just out of curiosity, so is the family looking ahead like a years, or is there a conclusion already that we're going to stay here, we're going to fly over to New Zealand, or what's the situation? Because that discussion comes up for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, at the moment, we're really happy here, and we don't have any plans to leave. But if there's a fundamental shift to the right in American politics, I don't know that we'll stick here that much longer. I value freedom of choice and reproductive rights for people. So I've got some issues with the current state of play here. So my wife and I are looking, at the moment we're really happy. We'll reassess in 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Well, you never know how the world changes. We need to remember that world has changed significantly since mid-February, for example, this year in Europe. So it's just you never know. Completely out of blue. So things and the security situations and everything changes. So it's just the status of the world where we're living. So it's hard to predict where we are in 5 years.
Yeah, I mean,
except in the Netherlands, of course. So, right, Waldek?
I'm thinking like how do we arrive at these? You know, it's Monday, like the sun is shining, and we're talking about like really serious topics. Like,
I mean, we bought a house 12 months ago. We're here for a good while.
Yeah, fair point. Fair point. Now let's come back on the work side of things. So you mentioned Craft Toolkit SDK. So that probably means that you're working with Vincent. And I was checking the organization chart through as well. Yep. So Vincent Bire used to be an MVP as well. We've been recruiting quite a lot of MVPs within the past years, which is a good.
And another one. We've got another one.
Exactly. But what does it actually mean? What does a principal software engineer does actually? What do you do for a living? What does it mean?
I'll let you know when I find out. I mean, the honest answer is I look at what we're planning to do and what we are doing, and weigh in where I think I need to. Yep. Say, hey, I think this is a really good idea or a bad idea, or maybe we need to look at different approaches. I advise the teams on, hey, these are things that are coming up that seem to be emerging trends in our space. These are things we need to be looking at. Have we looked at talking to this team over here about how they're doing things to, build on top of their knowledge? What are the things we can do to move faster in more sustainable and predictable ways? What are the emerging patterns, or are there key changes coming within the technologies that we're working in, as well as just writing code from time to time. That happens.
Yep. And as a
right,
and as your principal. Sorry.
So that's why I went for the software engineer role, not the PM role.
Not a PM.
I like to keep my hands.
The first part is like, well, that's a PM, like keeping out trends, looking at, and that sounds very much PM-y. But then like, I'm writing code. It's like,
yeah. So with the principal part is a lot of the collaboration, the work planning, and designing of what's going to be done.
That's kind of the one thing. If we think about the principal in Microsoft, it's quite often that's the level of a role where you're no longer being told every single day that do this. You're being expected to actually figure it out by yourself. And there's a bit of a cultural kind of a change. And if you join the Microsoft and you get to be a principal, you might be like, wait, nobody says what? But the expectation is kind of you're senior enough. You'll figure it out, and where you can make a dent, if a dent is a good thing in APIs. But anyway, so you can make an impact, and then figure out how to improve the implementations and all of that. So not saying that the seniors would not be that independent either. They are super human beings, of course. So why are we now in this philosophical level? Waldek?
I don't know. Like, you're different. Like bring back the old Vesa. Stop. This new Vesa is bring the old Vesa.
Yeah.
Like the seniors on my team are amazing people. They're talented folks who, in their own right, have great leadership and the ability to say, "Hey, this is the way I think this should be done. Let's do this." Vincent's a great example of that.
Absolutely.
He's been spearheading around Kyoto with the self-service SDKs.
Yep. Yeah. And Vincent is a good example. Now that we're talking of Vincent, we'll call you out, Vincent, by the way. Is a good example. We talked with him as he moved across the roles. He was a PM, but then he actually decided, no, I want to write code. And then
he actually shared a nice article about his experiences as PM. I think he was PM for almost a year, 9 months-ish. Right. So it was really interesting to hear like how he experienced the role as a PM in the graph org, right? Because like even a PM role will differ across the orgs, right? So because it depends at the end of the day where in Microsoft you sit, how like what dependence you have on other teams, what is the life cycle of the product you're managing, right? Because if it's very early on, you will be doing more discovery, product market fit work, where if it's product that's been around a few years, maybe you're gonna be looking at the next curve or trying to, lengthen the product life cycle and so forth. So it's a different game too, right? So it was interesting either way to hear from him how he experienced that and how he preferred to spend less of his time in email and more in code.
Yep. And, actually that article helped shape my decision about going for a software engineering role versus a PM role, because I had been thinking, maybe a PM role is the right move for me career-wise and the next where I want to progress to. And that honest feedback really helped me go, actually, no, looking at myself and the way I am, I like to be hands-on. I like to be able to write production code. So
I'm still struggling with that because I'm super hands-on and jumping on things, which is, by the way, a big problem, because then there's a lot of open like leads here and there, which you need to go.
Which is why the only thing you're allowed to write now is PowerPoints.
Yeah, I know. It's an ongoing joke, but I'm no longer allowed to write code. I guess it's a good thing though. So I've done my fair share of writing code, but so. And we actually, of course, it highly depends on a human as well. We need all different kind of people. We need people who can write code. We need people who coordinate communications. Communications is critical, as we already concluded. This a lot about people-to-people business, and communication is in the key part of that. So anyway, we all can find our own roles, right, Waldek? Waldek has his own role. You write actually code still, so.
Yeah, but it's different code. It is demo code.
True,
it's not production code.
Yes,
On the other hand, so in the open source world, I do write CLI for M65, and that is production code. So I'm not playing quite fair. And it's kind of this interesting thing that we have the room, even in our work, to pursue other things that you find interesting, and we are even encouraged to do that, right? Like if you want to try something, do it. Like there is room. Like my role isn't really fixed to a specific area, right? Because being advocate, it really spans anything and everything from docs to content to videos to improvement in product too, right? That is also a thing. And depending where you land on the spectrum, like you have folks who spend more time in docs, you have bunch of folks who create really awesome videos, then you have folks who love to hack, and there is room for everybody, and it's all perfectly fine.
True.
And the feedback we get from folks like Waldek and those DevRel roles really help shape what we're doing as an engineering team and the direction of what we're doing to ensure we're meeting customers where they are rather than where we think they are.
Yeah. Because again, the engineering team would not really scale for that, so therefore there's a separate team of doing that, and then the teams have their own objectives and the OKRs, how they're being measured and all of that stuff. So which makes perfect sense. Just to explain for those who are listening or watching and be like, how does it actually work? So
how much time do you have? How does it actually work? Like that is very all-encompassing question.
Now, from a timing perspective,
200.
Yes. From a timing perspective, being conscious about the time a bit. Now, we're going to ask three or a few kind of a top lists from you or tips from Gavin. Waldek, it's in your script on the.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Of course.
I have one thing, and that's a question. And now you mentioned it on my script, and it's top in there. One thing I see a lot, especially, social media, Reddit, all of that, like people are highly interested, like being dev, they aspire a job in Microsoft or any other large tech companies. Yep. I don't know if to what extent can you share anything from the interview you had? Like, was it the lead code kind of paper programming algorithms thing, or was it different? Was it really more something that is more geared in practice in real world experiences?
Great question. There was I had a really interesting series of interviews because it's not just one. It's a whole loop of interviews. The one that I enjoyed the most was actually the systems design interview, where we talked through a scenario and what would you do to design and build a system to do this, and okay, now what about this scenario within that space, and just the exploration of that space. Didn't write a single line of code, but we just talked through the problem space and covered it. The coding interview was challenging. Let's just say that.
You need to center a div on a page.
I walked away from that thinking I wasn't going to get a job offer, frankly. So, I mean, those interview processes are designed to extend you and take you well out of your comfort zone to understand where you are good and where you're not so good. And, that was a process. It's good. Yeah.
And it's, I think the hiring, Microsoft as a hiring company or whoever, they typically understands that there's always room for improvement. You do not need to be perfect. So it's not about being perfect. It's more about being honest and understanding where you can improve and openly also call them out. So if there's anything like, hey, I do acknowledge that this is an area where I can improve. I'm not super strong in here right now, but I can improve that. But this area I'm a bit stronger. Now, my question and top list or few things, lists or recommendations was around actually on this one as well. So we do look alike, we do think alike, or maybe it was in the script. So
it was in the loop component.
It was in the loop component, yes. What would be like 3 to 5, let's say, tips of preparing to the job interviews in Microsoft? How would you prepare now that you have that knowledge?
How would I prepare now that I have that knowledge? First of all, I'd actually spend a lot of time reflecting about what it is that I want out of a job. I think a job, a lot of people go into a job interview thinking, it's about me selling to the company.
Yep.
It's not. It's about having a conversation so that you and the company you're interviewing with can find someone who's the right fit for the role. That might not be you. And that's right, because if it's not you, you've dodged a bullet by not landing in a role that's not the right shape for you. You should be asking questions. Think about intelligent questions that show that you've done your homework about the company, the org, the product that you're going to be working with, and think about how you like to be managed. Ask the manager, how do you like to manage people? What do you think an effective way of managing people is? What are some times that you as a manager have made mistakes, and what would you do to change it? For me, that process was about finding out as much as I could about the group I was going into and going into it from that perspective. I had a degree of confidence about my technical ability and my background. So that was an area that I didn't focus on studying for as much. A lot of people say go and grind delete code questions, and for some roles that's really appropriate. I don't know that it's necessarily as appropriate for the role I was going for.
Makes perfect sense. That's actually really good tips for anybody to get prepared on the interviews. And of course, it like you said, it highly depends on what kind of roles you're applying and also on what seniority level you're applying to, because the questions and discussions are completely different if you're applying to a CVP level versus a PM versus a software engineer. So
I don't know. I've never applied for CVP role, so I have nothing to share in this space. However, I might try just for once for the experience.
Experience, exactly. Yeah. Just for the experience. Makes perfect sense.
So, what is your strategy, Vesa, to bring product X to 2 billion? That's a very good question.
That's a good answer, because that gives you some time to think through the right answer.
Not enough.
You know what? I would actually say one of the key strategies when you're interviewing is to echo the question you've been asked back to make sure that you've understood the question properly.
Yep.
Doesn't matter what the question is. Like, if I understood the question you're asking, you want to know this.
Yep.
It's
just rephrasing the same question.
Universally applicable, like not even for interviews, for working in any scenario. That's such a useful skill and question.
True.
So you actually said that a good tip is to echo the question.
Yes, I did.
Duly noted.
Cool. Now, what's just to wrap up the discussion, and thank you, Gavin, for your time. I know that you're super busy on catching up on things as well. But what's happening this week? Anything what you're going to talk about? It's Monday now. Any interesting things which under NDA, just with us in this video and the podcast here?
Yeah. So it's really interesting because I'm working on MGT, which is open source software. Most of what I'm doing, you can go and see, or a large portion of what I'm doing, you can go to GitHub and see what we're doing. We're working quite hard on a version 3 release for MGT, which will pull us up to the latest version of the Fluent UI web components and align the design, our look and feel from a design standpoint. So that's one of our big pushes at the moment. Being it's coming up towards the end of the month, we'll be prepping a release for MGT on our V2 branch. So those are the kind of couple of things that are coming up this week.
And that was AKAMS/MTT to get the Git application of Microsoft Graph Toolkit to see what Gavin is actually doing. So,
thank you.
So you can go there and add comments and all of that stuff on.
He's typing. Oh no, he's not typing. He's thinking. He's not typing.
Anything interesting, Waldek, on your side? What's happening this week?
This is my second week back from vacation, so I'm very caught up with email. No more emails for me to check. No more replies. I'm actually looking forward to talk to folks who are now back too, so that we can catch up on everything that has been done over the past weeks that I was away. And it's still very much time of the planning, finalizing our plans, and there are a few things that are in progress. So we will share more about that as we go more towards, I believe, September-ish.
Yep.
But specifically this week, on Thursday, actually, I will be showing one of the recently added features to SharePoint Framework, which is about extending list forms. So you might have heard that now in SPFX, you have this ability that you can customize the new view added forms on a list. And I'll walk you through the beginnings of it, like really the basics, what it is, how it works, really from the level 0, level 10, through all the basics, all the different things you have to have in place. And if time allows, we'll also walk through some demos, like what could you think of building on top of that. So if you have time, that will be, I'm so bad in time zone. So that is like
7 a.m. Pacific.
4 p.m. Amsterdam time, everything else in the world, I have no idea.
7 a.m. Pacific? Yes. I live in 2 different time zones for understandable reasons, so I can translate it. Yeah, exactly. So
does it also is it also like depending where in the Pacific you are, because that is a big place, Pacific.
That is true. Yes, we tend to, our family kind of relates on the Mexico side of the Pacific.
On that bombshell, Vesa, what's on your plate?
So I have to say, you're helping with some of the planning for demos and content for the upcoming conferences. So that's always highly useful. That's a super useful thing for the cloud advocates as well. But it's not like the CVPs and the PMs actually get to write the code on things. There's this. Luckily, we have cloud advocates who can help on the credible demos. On my side, a lot of community work, a lot of catching up on things. Still, it's just a lot of open-ended discussions and things. We're prepping on my PM side of the world. We're prepping SharePoint Framework 1.16 preview, and we're rolling out Microsoft Teams V2 SDK update right now on SharePoint Framework. So that's already 50% in targeted release demands, which means that all of the SharePoint Framework solutions are using Teams JavaScript SDK v2 automatically. But a lot of other stuff in the pipeline as well. But it's like we talked when we started this one, as a PM, communication, and so many things jumping in. And being in a company and being in a product for quite a long time, it means that I'm getting tracked on all of the technical discussions and all of that as well, because how does this work again? Why did we do this?
In 2008, you had this article. I have a question about it. And you're
but we'll spend 2 minutes on this. The interesting thing is, which is not necessarily that visible externally, is that, of course, the product itself, even though we do no longer ship really an on-premises version, except the one which is kind of forked from the SharePoint Online, but the back end still has a lot of functionalities which are the same as we had in 2010, 2016, or whatever. So the on-premises is kind of a mental mindset in the backend is partly there as well. SB Web is still there, so it's just an interesting nuances, and therefore, or let's say content type, site columns, all of that in the SharePoint, because I work in a OneDrive SharePoint world. All of that basic concepts of replication, copying, and all of that's inheritance still does exist. So all of that has an impact. So
in other words, what you're trying to say in a really elaborate way, that your investment in MCM that you've done way back when still pays off today.
Yeah, it's kind of, yes. But, yeah. No, not that it's actually a fun thing that you're the one who's getting then track on all of those discussions, but so.
Well, but look at it from the other side. Imagine that you were in there.
What?
I can imagine quite a few bad things happening.
Oh, yeah. Fair point.
Yeah, let's do this at scale. Hold up. This was not scale by design.
Cool. Anyway, so that's again back on the dinosaur discussions, and even Gavin is from the dinosaur background.
You used to build. I think when we first met, was it at the MVP summit in Seattle, or was it already in Redmond? When did you get your MVP?
We first met in Anaheim.
SharePoint conference in 2009. Was it 2009?
No, 2011.
11. Okay.
Huh. Time flies. Back then, you were working on public-facing sites in SharePoint, right?
I was as well.
Yeah.
Waldek was as well.
Yeah, WCM templates based on web templates and feature stapling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good old days.
The fun thing.
850.
850. Yeah, Pages library. Yes.
There you go.
The list type code of Pages library. So publishing Pages library, let's be precise.
Yes.
So. Anyway, bad memories. Echoes from history. No.
It was fun time. It was fun time. It was pushing the product way beyond the limits it was built for.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun.
Anyway, thank you, Gavin, for joining us on this memory lane. But congratulations on the new role. Really cool to have you in the company as well. And awesome to have one more MVP joining on the company, because, again, MVPs have the real world experience. It's not that the non-MVPs wouldn't have, but you've been around for a long time. You know how people are building for the Microsoft 365. So having that experience is really, really cool. And thank you for joining on this discussion. We'll get you on the show again at some point.
Sooner than in the next 4 years.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great to have this chat with you both.
Yes, Kevin. Great to catch up as well. It's been a while since we've been in the same location, so almost like a same location. But anyway, thank you everybody for watching and listening, and we'll jump on the weekly articles right after this with Waldek on the show. Cheers.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Gavin, for that discussion. Really, really cool. And congratulations to join Microsoft. We're super happy to have you here. You've been so active throughout the years in the MVP channels, community channels, and you certainly have sufficient amount of experience from a technical perspective, again, for the role. So that's part of the things. And of course, after a few months, you'll be running and doing changes and really making worldwide impact, which is really, really cool. as well. But let's jump on the weekly articles. So what's happening within the Microsoft news and in the community news. So let me share my screen. And can you see it? Can you see it?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. So first of all, not that much actually news from Microsoft this week. So the only organization which was releasing blog posts, which is a bit strange, was the Power Platform organization. Not that it's a strange for Power Platform organization release news, but that nobody else was releasing any news, which is a bit of an interesting coincidence. Probably will have a massive amount of news then on the current week. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which could easily happen. Anyway, on the Power Platform side, let's start from here. So Power Platform, Power Automate for desktop, there's a 2022 update and a new version available with new functionalities and new input options for Excel integration and SharePoint connector actions are now introduced also in Power Automate for desktop, and really, really cool additional scenarios. Related actually on that SharePoint connector actions. There was another blog post related on that one as well, which explicitly focuses on that from James.
Exactly. So it goes more in depth into this feature, what it means for you, what kind of things you can do with that. So if you're interested in that, that's definitely a great place to start to learn more about this new feature.
Absolutely. Then the Power Platform also released a new blog post on the Power App side, which is automatically create a Power App from a REST API, and this is actually really, really cool. So
yes, it is. It is really intriguing, right? So imagine being a non-developer, or maybe you are a dev. You have an API and you want to build an app on top of it. Well, typically you would need to go to do all the mechanics and that, and you start with an empty screen. Instead, what they share in the article, with the latest Power Platform CLI, you can apparently generate an app. You point to an API, and what you get back is a Canvas app. A Power App that basically has the basic in it, and probably the last thing left for you is to adjust the UI to your needs, maybe do some few things, but you no longer need to start from this empty screen. So it doesn't intimidate as much, especially if you are not really technically or highly advanced in tech, right? If you don't go as deep, and maybe
on this side of the tech, right? So
yeah. So in other words, like if you are not a dev, like it might be intimidating for you to start building an app against an API. So this might be a great place to start, because it takes this edge off and gives you a place to start that isn't an empty screen.
Yeah, and like mentioned, it's super easy with Power Platform CLI. You point to a connector, and then basically that generates just automatically the application baseline, which then have in scenario samples related on all the operations which are behind of that REST API or the connector, because the connector technology is the way how we expose APIs in the Power Platform, which is kind of an abstraction again on the complexity of an API. So really, really cool. This is certainly going to simplify things and speed up development for sure. And then again, focus on the UX level and the business logic behind, or the experiences for end users. Really, really cool stuff. We should do something like this in the other areas as well. We need to.
Also, that's an interesting thing, right? If you watch or listen to this episode, get back to us and tell us, is this something that you would like to see in other areas like Teams apps, SPFX apps, Viva apps? Would it be something that would help you? Or is it like connecting to the API isn't really the hardest part, really? So, meh.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because obviously we could invest in here if there's a demand for it. So please do let us know.
Would this make a meaningful dent? Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Now, on the Microsoft 365 platform blog side, there was some news related on the CLI for Microsoft 365 team. You can actually talk about this one because you're much closer to that team. So
correct. So TLDR, we invited 2 maintainers to join our team, right? As CLI grows. And in November, we checked. In November, we will be existing 5 years. And in the 5 years, we went from one person's idea and few commands, like 3 or 5, to this tool that is being used every single day by many, many folks. And we have few hundred commands. So CLI grows and keeps growing as M365 evolves and as we add new features. And we want to ensure that we can manage that growth in a way that doesn't harm us and gives everybody, timely answers to whatever requests you have, whether there is a feature you'd like to see, or you have question, or you caught a bug. So we want to ensure that we can handle all of that. So as our usage and engagement and reach evolves, we want to also grow our team so that it is in balance. And with that, it's really cool to see to get JC and Milan on our team because they've been highly active. They've been working with us a lot on things like from small enhancements to big features, providing ideas for improvements. So it's really great to invite them to the team and to have them join our team. And I'm curious to see, what will this lead to?
Yep, absolutely. And just to elaborate that even a bit more is that, of course, the CLI for Microsoft 365 is part of the Microsoft 365 platform community activities. And this is typically work what we internally even do on weekends and extra times or evenings. So it's not necessarily part of our role and time to do that. So it's open source, community driven. We as a Microsoft, we're part of the community. And CLI for Microsoft 365 is a brilliant example of highly successful one of those projects. And we're always looking for additional people being part of these engagements across the different projects which are running, because it helps on having more people who are maintainers, and we can be more efficient through the community channels as well. But thank you, really, really good news and awesome work, JC and Milan, on first of all being active and then getting invited on and accepting the maintenance of being a maintainer role in the project as well. Really, really cool. Awesome to say that. Now, we also had a new blog post from Louisa Fries around get started with planning your Power Apps components properly. And she's been really focusing again on the components creation side of Power Platform, on making them a bit prettier and more reusable rather than always starting the creation of an application from scratch, because that's not necessarily the most efficient way of making beautiful looking experiences. So she's calls out the different considerations and things to consider and how to get started on building those components. So really, really cool blog post from her. Now, there was a third one from the communities, which is from Duvan and Baena.
How to monitor build host agent from Power Platform, right? So imagine Azure DevOps, you have an agent that is responsible for doing builds, right? It picks up whatever you have in code and turns that into or runs on top of that a build. And you want to be able to monitor that in a way that, like in this case, you want to get adaptive card in Teams whenever build completed or not, or it failed, succeeded, and whatnot, right? So you want to be able to orchestrate that. And Power Automate is a really great way to do that because it allows you to really easily connect to both DevOps and Teams without feeling with auth by yourself. And it has the access to, the things like events from the pipeline and so forth and so on. And it also offers you this really easy way to post to Teams. So this is a great way to have Power Automate be that glue in between that allows you to monitor a service, in this case, Azure DevOps, and bring status info from that to where you already are in your work in Microsoft Teams, so that you don't need to pay attention to multiple things, but can work within Teams and get input from all systems that you use in there already.
Yeah, this is an awesome example of Power Automate being the business workflow engine behind the scenes and making sure that something happens there. Fine, let's actually move it in here. I'll push that one forward and all of that. So really, really cool. And of course, the user notifications around what's happening behind the scenes included in there. So really, really great work, Duvan, related on the process and clarifying how this could be done. Now, Laura had a new blog post about auto-configuring SharePoint sites with site templates to set up from start to finish. In a typical way, Laura goes through and explains the whole scenario and has a lot of details and insights related on all of the different things, what we can do around complex templates, which are not necessarily fully supported in the JSON, and how we can call on Azure functions and implement things and authenticate back and all of that stuff. So really, really cool stuff from her explaining the processes and models. And even though the out-of-the-box site template definitions are relatively flexible nowadays, quite often you need to do something extra, set a functionalities using API, and this really walks through how that can be done together with the integration in SharePoint and within the templates level. So really, really cool stuff. Thank you, Laura, on that. The cool thing about Laura's blog post is that they kind of consider, they answer all of the questions already. You're like, but is this covered? And it's there. But okay.
Yes, absolutely. Like it's always like being one step ahead of you. Like you read it, you come up with a thing. Like, yeah, it's there. Yeah, that's one thing to do. Because it only proves, right, that she's coming from a field, so she has a lot of hands-on experience with that, where you actually come across all of that, and then it's not just a single thought someone had and you share that, but it's basically the result of year-long experience in the field doing this work, and then you turn it into, like if I look back about on the different or the multiple years that I've done this, these are the different things that I encounter. Hence, I will turn that into an article that is really extensive, but covers really everything.
Yep, absolutely. Now, Marcin, who works in the Valo Solutions, works around with the SharePoint framework and builds stuff for the Microsoft Teams and Viva and SharePoint framework. And coming back on what you just said related on experiences from the field, he is a really good developer and building stuff for their offerings. Cool thing is that he is allowed to share his learnings within the blog platform and in open source as well. And this one, first article is around dependency injection using SPFX service code. So basically a pattern, how to do that, and what does it actually mean, and what's the benefits out of using this pattern within your SharePoint framework solutions. So really, really cool stuff from Marcin there. I'm going to actually cover the next one as well from Marcin, which is around batching Microsoft Graph requests from multiple SPFX packages. So how can we optimize the behavior with the SPFX solutions as we're using Microsoft Graph API, hitting the graph behind the scenes. Of course, we're hitting the graph because graph is the access point to everything. So, but really, really good learnings, not as super long things, but calling out the key scenarios and how things can be done. So really, really cool. That's, by the way, a good example of batching two different requests, which is optimizing. Rather than having one request, another request, third request, and waiting for background, you can actually do it as a batched operation. Then we had an article from you, Waldek.
Exactly. Yeah, so not really a deep dive tech article this time, but more around thinking about the work apps, right? So if you build apps for your company, like these, we call them work apps or apps for work, and they can be really about anything and everything, like managing projects, managing orders, whatever it is that your company needs to do for work, right?
Yep. And
oftentimes what we see when we talk to customers and partners is that these apps focus on their objective, right? So managing a project means showing project info, project team, and about that. And if you think about that, when you work on a project, there's more to it. Like you communicate with the customer, you communicate within project team, who is a project team. You need info about people who are on a team. You probably need files. And oftentimes you have other systems where you can store that info. Like on Microsoft 365, it would be Teams, Outlook, and SharePoint, right? So you wouldn't replicate that in your app, but you would reuse what is available to you and store the info there. The question is, how do you link to them? And probably the easiest way is to add a link to the relevant place in Outlook or in Teams to add deep link to a team or add deep link to a site where you have files. And I think that is a shame, because it leads to what? People having to have multiple tabs open on a screen, and to get the full context of their work, they need to go back and forth between files and Teams and the app to grab everything that they need to truly encompass where we are in project, what are we working on, and so forth and so on. And the alternative is something that I talk about in the article in depth, right? Is that you can use APIs that are available on Microsoft 365 to bring that data directly to your app. And there are benefits to that. So if you're interested in this space, not really going deep dive in the tech about how you would do it, but just the fact that you can do it and that's something for you to think about, check out the article.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all about the ideas. And okay, so can I do that? What does it actually mean? And then you spark an idea, and then you start implementing things. So because before we write code, it would be good to think through why are we writing the code and what are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
So
and even just the fact that you can do it, that's something that you could include, right? So just that first step, like, I didn't know that was a thing, right? Because
exactly,
we've been around for so long that to us, many of these things are, well, duh, of course you can do that. But, well, every day there are new folks who start.
Exactly.
And that's a new thing, right? And if you're coming from a different system or background, it might not be self-evident that you can actually do that, right? So that was my attempt to spark that interest and to raise that awareness, right? That yes, you can do that on 365.
Yep. Absolutely. Now, Marcus Merler had a new blog post as well related on Teams meeting app API in a bot activity handler. And it talks about how to access the information and using the APIs because there's more and more interest and hopefully more and more demand for Microsoft Meeting apps. So it is an interesting new scenario. And he actually demonstrates what kind of information is available, how you can access the information, how you hit the APIs and all of that within his sample. And if I remember correctly, he is already being scheduled to a community call to do a live demo and clarification and or repeat of the data within the blog post as well. So which is really, really cool. Awesome stuff. Thank you, Marcus, on that. Then we had an announcement related on PnP.js.
Yes, there was a new version of PnP.js version 3.6 this time. And there's a link with the release notes explaining everything that is new, what is fixed, what is added. So if you work with PnP.js, check it out. Check out the latest additions that will allow you to work more efficiently.
Yep. Yeah, it is coming back on the projects related to Microsoft 365 Platform Community, PnP.js as being one of those projects which are super widely used worldwide. It's just amazing. It's like,
is it hundreds or the de facto SDK for calling SharePoint, right?
Sure. It's if I remember correctly, it's actually it's hundreds of requests in a second worldwide which are coming in through PnP.js, which is just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So for an open source community project.
Exactly. And I guess maybe it would be good for us to, elaborate a little, like, how does PnP.js compare, for example, to the Microsoft Graph SDK that we have?
Well, PnP.js is there's few things. So first of all, PnP.js is using partly the native SharePoint REST API surface, so you don't have to authenticate with an Azure AD because if you're running in the context of the SharePoint already, that you kind of have access on the endpoints. Well, not kind of, you have access on the endpoints, and then PnP.js is an abstraction of that REST layer. Now, on the Graph JavaScript SDK side, right now, still the Graph SDK is not fluent. So there are Graph APIs in PnP.js focusing on certain areas, and it provides because it's kind of a fluent .lists, .get item, whatever. So you don't have to remember that full URL. Now, a lot of the learnings which are in the PnP.js are getting also adapted in the Microsoft Graph SDK. So sooner or later, we'll see an update on that side as well. And that doesn't mean that PnP.js is necessarily going to go away. There's a use case for that as well. But it's really kind of cool to see how widely this is being used. It was actually originally created in 2016, so it's been around for a while.
Time flies, huh?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Cool. Then we have 3 videos. Paula had a video related on the search, PnP Modern Search web parts, so using the search results web part in PnP Modern Search, and these are open source community-driven web parts actually, which are used in thousands and thousands and thousands of tenants all around the world within a monthly basis. So really, really cool to see the success here as well. And Paula talks about what does the web part actually provides and how it can be used to create your own enterprise search experience within your tenant. Then there was a video from April related on CSS basics.
CSS basics for low-code devs. So apparently, when you build Power Apps, you can use, like, HTML and CSS are relevant. And if you're coming from a no-code or low-code background, that might not be top of your head. So April gives you a great overview how to start, with HTML and CSS, what it's for, how it works, really the basics for you to be able to start and get you basically to the point where you can ask relevant questions. Okay, I need to know more about X, because it's oftentimes, the hardest part, where to start, because you cannot ask questions if you don't know what do you want to ask about, right? So it's like, where do I start? And where do I start is so broad, right? Because like somebody might want to teach you HTML in the context of, I don't know, a web app, and that goes way too far if what you want to build is Power Apps, right? So this is really neatly scoped to the context of Power Apps that gives you the basics that you need to be able to start using that effectively.
Yep, absolutely. Really, really cool video, and onto the point, what is relevant within this scope. So really, really cool 12 minutes video on that. Thank you, April, on that. And then we had a Power Hour recording. Power Hour, what is it? This is a video blog from Laura Rogers. And I can't remember her name. One second. Julie Jobson. So they always have a specific scenario where they talk about together on making it happen and what are the options and configurations and all of that. It's a recurrent series from within the Laura Rogers YouTube channel. So and this time it was around Power Apps export to CSV. So using a flow. So how can I actually make that happen? Really, really cool stuff as well. A lot of Power Platform stuff. More and more Power Platform stuff. It's kind of cool. So
it's good. And I mean, I get it. Like it appeals to a really broad audience, right? Like basically, if you can write formulas in Excel, well, you might already have, the necessary skills to build a Power App or a Power Automate flow. So I get it. Like it makes perfect sense, right? And it's already oftentimes available to you. So why not, automate some of your work and work a little bit more efficiently as opposed to try to repeat, the same steps over and over again?
Yep. Use the power, right?
Got the power.
So we already went through what's happening this week with Gavin. So that's already recorded. Anything else on your mind? So
anything beyond what's coming this week? No. The weather is still here. Summer is, despite the fact that we are back to work from the holidays, summer is still here. And Wednesday and Thursday is going to be again hot. So it's like it's going very much in waves. But other than that.
What's hot in Netherlands?
29, 30 centigrade.
Yeah, so 30 centigrade, Celsius in Fahrenheit, 85, 86? Yeah, 86. I've remembered that. I'm trying to, after all of these years,
memorize
memorize.
Instead of trying to remember the formula, you would just memorize like each
it's just
easier.
Exactly.
It's minus 30 divided by 2 if you want to go from Fahrenheit to centigrade, roughly.
Minus 30
divided by 2.
Minus 30?
Divided by 2. So 85 Fahrenheit minus 30 is 65. Divided by 2 is 32, roughly. So you have like 2 centigrade difference.
Okay.
Error?
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Fair point. Okay, fine. Okay.
What is it? What are you talking about?
We're hitting the forecast the same in Helsinki for the rest of the week, or the latter part of the week. So this morning it was brilliant. It was raining. It has not been raining
brilliant.
Here for a long time.
It was raining.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with rain.
That's not my like your brilliant isn't my brilliant.
No, but it's a good example. I go out with the dogs every single morning. Multiple times in a day anyway, because I have to. We have responsible dog owner. You need to do that, regardless of the weather. So it doesn't matter if it's minus 30 Celsius or minus 30 Fahrenheit or plus 30
minus
Celsius.
30 Celsius. Would the dogs want to go out?
Yeah, of course. You
really
will go out. Of course
you have Finnish dogs. You have proper Finnish dogs. Like here, the dogs would be like, no going out.
Yeah, we do go out in minus 30. Yeah, no problems.
Okay,
so
good for you.
And therefore, when it's raining, it's actually nice to be outside. It's fresh air. It's the oxygen levels are much higher. There's less people. Super important thing.
Real Finnish problems, right?
Anyway. Cool, but I guess that's it. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you for that one, for the interview and discussions for this week, and for all of the other people listening and writing and creating content in the Microsoft 365 space. Please use hashtag PnP Weekly, so we notice what you are creating and we can promote them within these calls as well, and throughout the week. So of course we're following up on what's happening within the hashtags in social media. But thank you everybody for your awesome work within the past week. And coming back on the reminder, we did have an action. If you would feel that it would be worthwhile that we would have some sort of a CLI or auto-generating of the code, for example, for Microsoft Teams application, SharePoint Framework application, in the same way as what Power Apps did, please let us know. We are both in social media, add comments on the discussions or ping us privately. So,
and maybe also another thing. I don't know if we can do it publicly. If we can't, we will just cut this part.
Okay.
And no, we'll never know, right? Is there a scenario or a way for you if you think about integrating SPFX and Power Apps? Does that ring a bell? Do you have a scenario on your mind that you're like, yes, if I could do something with these two, I would do X?
Good. Yes, that's actually really good. So if would you be interested in writing maybe Power Apps components with SharePoint Framework or similar SharePoint Framework style way for your Power Apps in your tenant? So that would be interesting to understand as well. There's a interesting set of discussions internally in Microsoft related on options where we might be investing in future. But thank you everybody for watching. Have a great rest of the week. Stay healthy. Enjoy life. What else?
So long, and thanks for all the fish.
That is good. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.